Hi, I'm Mayor Dave Bartholomay from the city of Circle Pines, and I'm here today to talk about our parks. We're standing here on a beautiful fall day, and I'm at Carl Park and Lions Field. These are two Little League baseball fields here in Circle Pines. Behind me, I've got the original building that was built in the early 1980s, so it's about 30 years old. And this building, unfortunately, is struggling a bit. You know, the restrooms don't work, it's not up to date for having food and concession stands and things like that, but the fields themselves are wonderful. We just had volunteers out here to put in new fields and fix up the infields, put in a good sprinkler system, and part of the reason we're doing all this kind of work is because next year, in 2022, we're going to be holding the state tournament for Little League right here in Circle Pines. It happened once about, maybe it was 10, 12 years ago, I think, and is coming back. And so we want to make sure that our fields and our buildings all look great, both for our residents and our kids that play here and the families that come to support them, but also for the fact that we're going to have people from all across the state coming to Circle Pines to watch some Little League baseball. So one of the things that we've been thinking about as a city and as a city council is what do we need to do to kind of maintain and take care of our buildings? Some of these buildings are cinder block buildings with pretty tough situations facing them. And so the question is, how do we rebuild those, reinvest in those in an affordable, manageable way? So this is one example of a fields where the baseball fields are great, the building and stuff, not quite so much. The restrooms don't work much at all. Sometimes we end up using a porta potty out here. So we're looking at trying to fix this up and trying to do it in an affordable way. Now we've got a couple other parks I want to show you too that really kind of drive home the same message. We've got a good foundation, but it's starting to fray around the edges a little bit. And if you think about Circle Pines, you think about, for example, our street projects. We started 15, 20 years ago, going through each street, making sure the water lines, the sewer lines, the street itself was in good shape. It's one of the things we kind of find as an area of agreement is to maintain your infrastructure. So I think that next up is some work on our parks. So we'll talk about that today with you. Thanks for being along, and now we're going to go over to another park and take a look at another one of our beautiful facilities here. Now we're here at Inner Park in beautiful Circle Pines. This is a park that's had a little bit of work, but could probably use a little more. The baseball field's been updated, and part of that was from the Slipka Foundation. They provided us some financial resources to be able to make that happen. And we've also taken our hockey rink here and also made it into pickleball courts for the summertime and put a couple basketball hoops along the edges. So we're trying to get as much out of each park, each facility as we can. You notice the building behind me, that again is another cinder block building that was built in the early 80s, so it's 30 years old. And it needs some work too. And so the question is for each of these parks is, what's needed here? What would make sense? And the beauty is we have a park board of citizens who are on that board who will be looking at all this, trying to figure out, if you had a big long-range plan, what would be needed for each park? Either for like safety and security, or for things like upgrading maybe some of the facilities, the buildings, or maybe it's adding some elements that people would like to see in their parks. And so each park has a strength, each park is in a particular neighborhood, often tucked pretty closely in with a lot of neighbors and houses. So we need to be thinking of all those things as we put together a plan for what should our parks look like now and make sure they're getting ready for the future, for the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Parks and trails are a big part of Circle Pines, always have been. We believe that we have more parks and trails per capita than anybody else in the metro area. So we need to make sure they're in good shape and doing what the residents want. Next, we're going to go on to another park and take a look at what it's got to offer and maybe a little bit of what might be needed there. Now I'm at Baldwin Park. Now Baldwin Park has a lot of different things going on. It's got a baseball field that's the size more for high school kids. It's got a playground, you can see behind me, it's got a community garden, it's got a hockey rink, and it's got a building that again was built in the early 80s. Now the question is, what do we do for Baldwin? Okay, and again, that'd be a park board decision. But for example, the hockey rink now is just dirt. If that hockey rink had pavement, blacktop inside of it, first off, it'd make for better ice in the winter for the kids that want to skate and play hockey. But it would also make it so we could do the same thing you just saw over at Inner Park. And at Inner Park, they've taken and put in pickleball courts inside of that hockey rink. Apparently it seems to work pretty good. I've only played pickleball one time, went through a class at Centennial Community Ed to learn how to play it, but it's a very, very popular game. And the nice thing about putting that pickleball court inside of a hockey rink is you have the walls there, so the ball, if it gets away from you, doesn't go very far. So there's some possible upgrades here at this park. The other piece is that right behind this park is a lot of nature areas. And in those nature areas is where there'll be someday be a regional trail that benefits all the metro area. It connects Baldwin Park and Golden Lake Park. And that will then also move from there all the way up to Lino Lakes and White Bear and all the way up to Duluth. So it's always interesting how a local park can kind of connect to other areas, other communities. So when we look at a park like this, when we look at any of the upgrades, it's a possibility of thinking, okay, how much can we afford and what's needed? And then what do the neighbors and residents of a community want? And we just got our census done, so we know a little more about age and some of those things. And we know that playgrounds are very important, but that also people love their parks and their trails. So the trails are connecting some of these parks. We got to make sure they're in good shape too. Sometimes that means paving the trail. Now, paving a trail is more expensive than just having it being kind of a rock, but the nice thing about paving is then whether it's strollers or people in wheelchairs or bicycles, a lot of people can use that trail more than if it's just dirt. So some trails might get paved, but a lot of them we'd also like to have in that kind of natural area. End of the day, Circle Pines has got beautiful parks that could use a little bit of a refresh or an upgrade. It's also got a lot of natural surroundings that make it a great place to live, and that's what we're trying to do. Just keep this place the best place we can for our citizens. So thank you very much, and we'll see you out in our parks and on our trails.